Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of 3D Prototyping in Unity. My name is Kasanas. In the last episode, we set up our character for melee. The character is going to be able to swing his weapon from the shoulder and strike whatever is in front of him. We set up the animation state machine in an additive layer, as well as created an animation mask that's going to mask out certain portions of the animation in the actual animation we created originally. In this episode, guys, we're going to be writing code that makes it all work. At this point, nothing actually works. It hasn't broken anything. Your game could still be played exactly as it was. So if it doesn't work, then something else has gone terribly wrong. But it doesn't actually swing its weapon yet. In today's episode, guys, we're going to be adding that weapon swing in. All right, let's get started. Okay, guys, so today's episode is going to be relatively code heavy. We'll make sure that we're going nice and slow, but all we're going to be looking at today is the code that's going to allow you to swing your weapon in a melee swing and hit something. Now, there's a couple things I want to define, and that's exactly how this is going to work. I don't want my character, if we hit play right now, let's take a look. If we hit play right now, my character is in the walk state. My character stays in a relatively upright stance, and in the jump state, we stay with our weapon in an upright stance, and that's great. If we run, however, if I run, my weapon swings down and it's down at my side. So what I really want to do is I want to make sure that my character can only swing his weapon in melee when it's either in the idle state, in the walking state, or in the jumping state. In the running state, I don't want my character to be able to swing in melee. We're going to prevent that through code. And I also want to set up this code. I'm going to set up some code that's going to allow us to define based on the weapon we're carrying. So later on when we add an inventory system, we can change how much melee damage and how often we can do melee damage and everything else based on the weapon itself. So I'm going to put this code today in two places, on the player controller, and then we're going to invent a new script called the melee script, and that melee script is going to go on to an individual weapon, and you'll be able to add it to each different weapon and change the parameters and properties of that individual weapon. Okay, so to start off with, let's take a look at, let's open up our, let's go into our scripts, and let's go into our player controller and open it up. Okay, our player controller. Now there's a couple things that we're going to have to know. First of all, what we're going to want to know in the player controller is whether or not we are running. I don't want to have to, I've already got that defined in here. I've already got a number of things defined in the player controller itself. I have whether or not we're running, whether or not we're all doing all this kind of stuff we can possibly do in the player controller script. So I don't want to do that in another script as well. So what I'm going to do, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new bool. I'll create it, where's my mouse? Right underneath here, and I'll create a new bool that I'm going to call running. And the running bool is going to define whether or not we are moving at a run or a walk. Okay, that's all it's really going to define, whether or not we're at a run or we're at a walk. And I want to be able to send this later on to other scripts, particularly the melee script, to be able to poll this script to tell me whether or not I'm running or not. Okay, so what does that mean? First of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to define when I'm running and when I'm not running. In my fixed update, right at the very top, I'm going to turn off running immediately. Running equals false. All right, so immediately in my fixed update, we set our running to false. And what I'm going to do next is I'm going to define in my fixed update, because all this code will run before anything's really executed. Within my fixed update, I'm going to define whether or not we are running or we are walking. And we already know, if we take a look down here right here, in this if statement, if we are sneaking or we're firing, then we're actually walking. Otherwise, we're running. So right down here, we already know if we're moving at this velocity with my run speed, then our running is going to be equal to true. And this code, the code that's currently here, will take everything into account. All right. So with these two lines added, we now know if we're running or we're not running by updating that running bool. Now what we want to be able to do is tell another function or another script whether or not we're running. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to actually add a bunch of hard returns down here. So this is kind of in the middle. I'm going to add a new public script. All right. It's going to be a public. And this time it's going to be a bool. So I'm going to be, a bool. This time it means I'm going to be returning a bool. All right, and I'm going to call this get running. And because there's not going to take any parameters, bam, bam, and bam. Now, because this is public, we can actually get to it from another script. It's available to other scripts in order to check and see this result or to run this code. And all I'm going to do is return the value of running. That's all I want to do, is returning the value of running. I don't know if it has to be in brackets or not. I better put it in just in case. So return my value of running. And that way, whatever function, whatever other script pulls this function here, and it'll actually get the value of running. All right, now I'm going to file save this. File save. That's all the changes I have to make with that. Oh, get out of here, software update. Anyway, the next thing I want to do is I want to make a change. I want to actually add something. So I'm going to add a brand new script, and I'm going to add this brand new script to soldier. Scroll down, soldier. Come on. I'm going to add this brand new script to the actual weapon. So let's go down here, and currently my weapon is way down here somewhere in my hand. So I'm going to drill down in here till I actually find my weapon. All right, here's my assault rifle, here's my LMG, and here's my gun muzzle. I actually want to make these changes to gun muzzle. Gun muzzle, everything else here, the LMG, the assault rifle, are just holder pieces, and the gun muzzle is what actually defines how this weapon works. So currently we have our fire bullet script, and we're going to go through and make some changes to the fire bullet script later on, but I want to add a melee script here as well. So I'm going to say add a new component, bam, add new script. And we're going to call it, let's call it melee script. Melee script. Bam. And let's open it up. Double click. And there's my melee script with my error. Bam. Bam. All right, here's my melee script. My melee script is going to be responsible for everything that happens in melee. All right, that's what I'm going to use it for. It's not going to be a very long script, but we're going to have to define a number of different things. And this is what's going to allow me to interchange this with other weapons. Let's say later on I add a sword, or I add a spear, or whatever I add in here, we're going to be able to take this and attach it to this script to something else. And by adding public variables like float, like how much damage a melee hit does, for example, will allow me to change how the weapons act. So first thing first, I'm going to add damage. Second thing, I'm going to add a float. I'm going to add a public float, and I'm going to add knockback. So my knockback, so that my melee hit will actually knock creatures away from me. Okay, so it'll give me a little bit of breathing space. And I'm going to add a public knock. How am I going to spell this? Knockback radius. So the knockback radius is going to be how large of a space my creatures can be knocked back from. And lastly, I'm going to add a public float that I'm going to call melee rate. And that's going to be how often I can actually swing my weapon. So maybe if it's a really, really heavy weapon, you might not swing as often. And if it's a lighter weapon, you can swing it more often. So it'll make it advantageous to have one weapon over the other. Okay, later on we are going to add a really simplistic inventory system, so this will allow us to change up our weapons. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to add a float. This is not a public function, and next melee. So the melee rate is how often you can swing, and next melee is the next time that you can actually swing. And the last thing we're going to add is our int. Oops, is our int, and we're going to add the shootable mask, because we don't want them to be able to shootable mask. We don't want our player to be able to swing at everything and hit everything. We only want them to be able to hit certain things, and when we hit certain things, it's going to cause damage, etc. All right, so our shootable mask is obviously the same masks that we created before, where whatever it is shootable. So anything that's shootable is also, you can also strike it in melee. We need a link to our animator, and we'll call it my anim. And lastly, we need a link to the player controller script. Not player controller. What did I call it? Player control. Oh, I hate it when I do this. Player controller. Oh, I guess it is called player controller. I thought I called it player controller script, but I only call it that, player controller. And we'll call it my PC. All right, that is all the variables you need to start off with. Okay, so let's initialize some of those variables. First thing we're going to initialize is we're going to initialize the shootable mask. And our shootable mask is going to equal layer mask dot get mask get. Oops, I didn't put a period. Sorry. Get mask. That was a semicolon there. Or sorry, a colon there. Get mask, and we want to find the quotations shootable quotations. So the shootable layer we already defined in the past, and we're already using it through our game, right? It's what we can shoot. The next thing we want to define is our actual animator, and the animator is not located anywhere near this system at all. My anim, having a hard time typing today, is going to be equal to, and we're going to go to the transform of this object. So we're going to take a look at the transform, and we're going to go all the way to the root. So this object, our gun muzzle, is located underneath our weapon, and our weapon, so whether it's an LMG or whatever, so it's located underneath our rifle, and we're going all the way up past the rifle to the root of this object. The root is a soldier. So in the hierarchy itself, the weapon is in the hierarchy, and the gun muscles are within that as well. So we're going to go all the way to the root of the soldier itself, which is where our animator is located. And we're going to get our component, and obviously we are looking for an animator. All right, and that's going to give us a reference to the animator located on the soldier itself. The next thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to look for my PC. So we're going to look for the actual player controller script, and the player controller script once again is located in the transform dot root. It's not located on this thing at all. Dot get component. Oops. Dot get component. Root dot get component. Get component, and this time here we are looking for our player controller script. Player controller script. All right, so both those lines are going to give us a link to the actual player controller and the animator itself, located on an entirely different area. Last thing we're going to do is next melee, which we're going to set to 0F, and that is going to allow us to swing our weapon right away in melee. Okay, I'm going to save that so I don't crash. File save. Now, everything else is going to occur in fixed update. Let me add a bunch of hard returns in here. Fixed update. So we're going to do everything in fixed update. And the fixed update basically is where we're going to try and capture everything, right? Like we've done this before. In the fixed update, we're going to look to see if our player is actually pushing a button. So let's say float melee is going to be equal to, and this is whether or not the player is actually pushing a button. Input dot get axis, and we're going to use dot get axis. We're going to actually use the axis of, oh my god, quotations, fire 2. And fire 2 is the shift button. So if the player is hitting the shift button, then we're going to return a value for melee. So melee between 0 and 1. So with that said, if melee is greater than 0, meaning they're actually pushing the button, and ampersand, and next melee is greater than, is less than time. That means that the character can actually swing his weapon, right? And let's add something else here. Ampersand, and we're not running, right? We don't want our character to be able to swing their weapon if they're running, so not. And we've already got ourselves a value of running that we can return from my PC dot get running. All right, that was the function we already defined, and this is going to return the value of running. So if they're not running, then everything is cool. 1, 2, 3, and open bracket. And close bracket. There we go. All right, so if all those conditions are true, if they're not running, if the next melee is past, if time is past the next melee, and we are actually pushing the button, then we actually want to start swinging our weapon. So the first thing we want to do is my anim. We want to make sure we're setting our trigger, right? We defined a trigger in the last episode. Set trigger. We defined a trigger in the last episode, and I've completely forgotten what we called it. We called it gun melee? I hope we did. Otherwise, this is not going to work. So gun melee is what I think we called it. I'm just being lazy. Let's go check. Let's go check what we called it. Soldier, animator, parameter, gun melee. Okay, all right. Gun melee, so that's right. We're going to set our gun melee, so that means we're going to actually trigger the animation itself. It's gonna go off, and everything's going to look cool. The next thing we're going to do in this if statement is we're going to set our next melee equal to our time.time plus our, and what did we call it up here? We called it our melee rate, plus melee rate. Melee rate. All right, so that's going to set up the next time we can actually swing our weapon. Now, the next thing we want to do is actually do damage. So let's put this in here. Damage. We actually want to do damage. And the way we're going to do it is very similar to the way we did our damage, or so the way we decided whether or not we were in contact with the ground. We drew a small sphere, and anything that we collided with, if we collided with the ground, then we were saying we were grounded. We're going to do exactly the same thing here with our weapon. What I want to do is it collects a collider, list of colliders actually. Collider. So it's going to give us an array of colliders, and let's call this attacked. Or yeah, attacked is fine. So what we're going to do is we're going to do exactly the same thing. We're going to use the physics dot overlapping sphere, overlap sphere, and where do we want to do it? Where is in our transform dot position. So we want to position. We want to actually create our small sphere at the transform position of our current gun muzzle, right? And the gun muzzle is located at the end of our weapon. So that is the location. Anything that's standing at the tip of our gun is going to be hit by this sphere. Now there is a risk in doing it this way. In doing this way here, our gun muzzle is physically attached to the weapon itself, and the weapon itself swings, right? It's part of the animation. The weapon itself swings. So if it's not drawn fast enough, there is a risk that we might not hit whatever it is that we're doing. So it's going to be a little bit of a risk. I haven't found a problem with it so far, and it seems to be working fine. So you could really do this with any weapon you wanted. So we're going to do it at the position. The next thing, how big is the sphere? And we already defined it as, we're going to define it as knockback radius. Knockback radius. All right, we defined that above. It's a public variable. And the last thing is the mask. If we want to have a mask, and we do, we want it to only affect our shootable mask. All right, we define that above as well. Bam. So it's going to draw our little circle, right, our little sphere right there, and it's going to return a list of. It's going to return a list of objects that's hit by that sphere, or that collides with that sphere. So theoretically, you could hit like 10 creatures at the same time if they're all kind of piled on top of each other, and your knockback radius is large enough. Okay, everyone, sorry about that interruption. I actually had to go answer the door. Kind of sucks sometimes to be working from home and not in an office. Anyway, it's a good thing I did because I actually caught a mistake. When I came back, I hit play and I caught a mistake that I wouldn't have caught otherwise, and I'd been looking like a fool. So, where were we? We were at a point when we had set up our collider list, our collider array. Attacked is getting this information from the overlap sphere. It's going to return any of the actual colliders it overlaps with, and later on in a future episode, when we've actually created our enemies or things that we can damage, then we're going to do damage here. Now, there's something I noticed I messed up in here. In this, was it here? No, it was in this else statement right here. I had simply if running is equal to true, and this actually doesn't work. We are currently back in the player controller, and we had simply set our running to be equal to true, and that doesn't work because our velocity, this value, is always going to be true even when we're idling, and that's not what we want, all right? So we want to make sure that our move is actually greater than 0 before we set our running to true. Otherwise, we're not actually running, we're just standing still and idling. So running is only true if, and we're going to take the absolute value of it, so we're going to use the, let's just do it like this. We're going to take the absolute value of it, so the math.f dot abs, and abs means absolute value of move. So if the absolute value of move is greater than 0, absolute value is greater than 0, then we are actually running. So this is what the line should be. Let me save this. Let me save this. File save, and let me go back and make sure everything's done here. I was away for quite a while, so I'm hoping I didn't screw anything else up. Everything should be saved now. Let's go back over here and take a look. Let's clear this. Clear. No, there's a parsing error. Oh, I know why. Let me go back and take a look. This is why. Sorry. There we go. File, save. All right, so with that saved, file save, all good. When I come back here now, everything should be cleared. All right, good. When we take a look at our actual gun muzzle, we're going to have values in here. I can put in a damage. So let's say we actually want to do 10 damage with each swing. Our knockback is going to be equal to, let's say, 10. Our knockback radius is going to be kind of small, 0.5. And let's say that we can actually swing our weapon every 1 second. That's every 0.5 seconds. Oops. 0.5 seconds. If that's the case, and let me file save this now. File save. When I hit play, boom. Oh, I got to turn maximize on play back on. Maximize on play. Boom. Whenever I push the right mouse button, I should swing. Now that's a little bit slow. That's a little bit slow. And you can see that the animation is not exactly as we set it up because the animation should be, the animation itself should affect the entire body, and it's not. So that's my issue as an animator. Next time I do an animation where I know I'm going to be, where I know that I'm going to actually be using a mask of some kind, I'll make it slightly different. But in this situation, there's nothing I can do about it. So guys, that's it. Our actual attack works. In a future episode, we'll actually fill in what exactly happens in there. This is how you're going to do any kind of attack you've got. If you're building a different type of game and you've got a sword or whatever, this will work exactly the same way. All right, you can do it exactly the same way. I'm really sorry about the interruption during this episode, guys. Sometimes when I'm at home, things just get a little messed up. And I've lost my train of thought, so I'm really hoping when I go back and watch this, everything I needed to tell you is actually here. I'm really hoping. If not, there's going to be a supplementary video coming your way. Anyway, guys, let's do one last thing. I'm going to increase, let's go to our actual, where am I looking around here? In my actual project, I'm going to increase the rate of that animation. Let's go into our models. Let's go into this animation, player melee. Not here, what am I saying? In my animator, go back to my character here, soldier, go back to my animator, and let's increase the speed of this to like 1.25. Something like that. Make it look a little better, I think. That's a little better. 1.25. Anyway, you want to be able to strike right away. So that looks pretty good. Anyway, guys, that takes us to the end of this episode. Like I said, I'm really, really sorry that I had the interruption in there. And I hope that you guys didn't lose the train of thought or that I didn't skip anything. And if I did, I'm really sorry. So if you guys enjoyed it, let me know with a thumbs up. I'm hoping that you guys are putting together really awesome games. They don't have to be shooting games now. With this melee attack, you can start doing sword games or anything else that you really want to do. So guys, thumbs up, thumbs down, comments down below, and if you haven't done so, please take a few seconds to subscribe. Have yourselves a wonderful day, everyone.